On our morning show get-together today, we were able to kind of work our schedule and their schedule to get them in the studio this month. State Senator Howard Marklein here representing the 17th Senate District and Representative Tony Kurtz representing the 41st Assembly District. Gentlemen, it's been kind of a slow news month. Haven't heard much that's been going on here.
Yeah, quiet time in the Capitol.
Quiet time in the Capitol.
Yeah.
And Tony, we saw a picture of you. You found a mushroom. Did you find one mushroom, did you? Or?
Oh, no, it was crazy. I mean, that was probably the most mushrooms I ever... But first of all, good morning to everybody. But no, yes, we had that real nice spike in heat there for a while, and then we had our rain, and yeah, it was like a bonanza, the most I've ever found under one tree.
That's interesting.
It was crazy.
Because I've heard some stories of not finding much from some of the veteran hunters around the area.
Oh, I was with some people last night at the Sauk County unit meeting for the Towns Association, and yeah, they were complaining. We said, we haven't found any, and I said, I just lucked out. We went to this one tree, and I was like, wow. I mean, there was probably... Well, I got 5 pounds of mushrooms underneath that one tree. Yeah, it's crazy.
That's like old school. Right?
Yeah, like old school.
Sounds good. You've been in the Richland Center area quite a bit here lately, haven't you?
Well, there's a lot going on. I mean, obviously, you did the Walk with Grace a couple weeks ago, and that was a tremendous success. I really liked how all the first responders. I mean, you even had one of the SWAT team, but one of the special teams out of the Sauk County Sheriff's Department came down. So yes. It was a really good showing, and I hope they raised a lot of money.
Hickston was here too. That's about it.
Yeah. Yep.
2-hour drive or whatever it is.
They did a lot of. It was really nice, and I think a lot of people did like the new location there at the high school, and I know people really liked the path, the cross country path they made up in the hillside. So it was nice. It was great.
Good deal. Howard, you've been busy lately, too. We've noticed that I think you were in Prairie du Chien at Villa Louis recently?
Yes, yeah. Monday, Travis Tranel and I were invited down there. I had never been to the Villa Louis site, and it's an interesting, very interesting site, great history. And so it was good to be there, and of course was in Muscadet for their Morel Mushroom Festival, and it was quite cool, actually. Which is fine because I've been there some years when it was brutally hot. So it was very comfortable, and it's always good to support them. And had a great steak on Saturday, so that was good.
Good to kind of get out in the country and maybe kind of cleanse the spirit a little bit.
Oh yeah, and there's so many events going on now. I look at my schedule and like breakfast. There's fire EMS breakfast. There's evenings. I was in Bloomington the other night for an EMS recognition, and I don't know. There's just stuff going on all over, and we're getting into that time now over the next I think my first dairy breakfast is next week, and so they start out, and then of course county fairs kick off for me in early July, and so yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on, which is good. It's we should be busy in the summertime.
You bet. Finally get some good weather here, maybe. Well, let's dive right into it. The additional support for schools and tax relief bill didn't go the way you wanted it to, Howard.
It sure didn't. I was so disappointed. And, we had worked on that for months, literally months. And what happened was back in January, mid-January, we got updated tax collection numbers from the Nonpartisan Legislative Fiscal Bureau, which indicated we were going to be receiving much more in taxes than what we had expected when we did the budget last summer, and to the tune of like an additional $1.5 billion, which is not a rounding error. And so we started working with the governor shortly thereafter about ideas, and concepts and all that. And we came up with this proposal, and and it was, and again, I want to compliment the governor. I thought he agreed to a very, very reasonable proposal. I mean, he didn't get everything he wanted. We didn't get everything we wanted, obviously, and stuff. But it was a good proposal for the citizens in my district and the citizens in this state. And you talked about like the schools and stuff. I mean, it was significant in terms of the increase in their special education funding. And anyway, and we can maybe talk about that in a minute. But and then there was $350 million in property tax relief, and I've heard as I've been out and about at a lot of these events, people are concerned about their property taxes. So I would have helped them. We would have exempted the income tax, state income taxes on overtime and on tips to parallel what was going on with the federal, law. And then it also included checks back, $300 per person, basically $600 for a couple. And again, I've talked to people, especially younger families that are faced with high gas prices and diapers and everything else, and it would have helped them, and so it was a good proposal. It was fiscally responsible, and anyway, and then it just like I said, it was politics at its worst. I blame both sides. I was disappointed. There wasn't a single Democrat in the Senate that voted for it, and and that's sad. I mean, we've got some, Senate Democrats that represent some rural areas too, that their schools would have benefited significantly. So anyway, it's just disappointing. And of course there were Republicans. 3 Republicans voted in the Senate, voted no. So if you look at the vote in the Assembly, I'll let Tony talk about that. But it was a pretty strong bipartisan vote in the Assembly. So I don't know. Again, it's just as I've shared with people, the need is now. It isn't, and the narrative that I've heard from the other side is, well, you just wait till next year and it'll be better, and all this stuff. Well, that doesn't help anybody today. That doesn't help our schools today. It doesn't help our taxpayers today that are facing higher costs. So yep, it was not a good day in Madison.
I know in your press release, you may have said it here, but you talked about politics at the worst, and that's kind of what you saw, right?
It was just, and again, I'm not blaming one. I mean, there's enough blame to go around. It's just, the people that voted no on this, it was for what I think were largely selfish reasons, political reasons. And, we have opportunities once in a while in the legislature to come together, as we did with the governor, in this proposal, and do what's right for the citizens. And you may not get everything you want in that bill, but it's the right thing to do, and now was the right time. And unfortunately, it didn't happen. And like I've said, many times, it was politics at its worst.
Tony, from the Assembly standpoint, you were optimistic, I think, weren't you?
Oh, we were. I mean, to Howard's point, this was a bipartisan bill. We had, we had 10 Democrats that voted for this. They realized the importance for it. I might be a little bit more not as politically correct as Howard, because it's astonishing that because you had three Republican senators that voted against it, and then you had all 15 Democrat senators vote against it. And to Howard's point, they had various reasons. Let's be honest, the 3 Republicans, they want to save this money because they want to do a large, they think, Republicans are going to have total control next session, so they want to have a larger tax cut. Okay. And then you had my 15 Democrat colleagues who, they want to wait for next session because they think they're going to have a trifecta on the Democrat side, so they want to save that money for whatever they want to do next session. And the problem is the timeline. As Howard said, people are struggling right now. You have our school districts that could woefully use that special education money. Just for Richland alone, it was about $650,000 in new special education funding for Richland. For Ithaca, it was almost $80,000. For Weston, once again, $85,000. So that's money that those school districts will not be getting. And what bothers me the most is there are people that voted for the no tax on tips and no tax on overtime a few months ago, but then turned around and then when it was on the table, negotiated with the governor, they voted no. That's what bothers me the most. This was something that, the governor actually said this. So this was a no-brainer. And unfortunately, like I said, I try to be very even-keeled. I hope people realize this. This was total politics. And It is very disappointing. The interesting thing about the no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, unlike the federal government, that will expire if they don't renew it in tax year 28. The one in our proposal, agreed with the governor, was going to be permanent. So those folks would have seen the no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, the property tax relief. It's like I said, I'm still shocked about it because it's something that we can afford. I do want to emphasize, I know some people are that I've seen talk about why they voted no, or some talking heads, well, there must have been some poison pills in here. There was no poison. These were clean bills. I mean, the governor's staff just went over them. Our staff went over them. There was no gotchas, no little hidden things. The other big thing they talk about is we were going to have a deficit. Well, I know for a fact Howard and I were here several times over the last year talking about how the revenue numbers are coming in stronger than anticipated. And right now we have a projected surplus of about $2.4 billion once again. So that's one pot of money. We always say that's in our checking account, but a lot of people forget about we still have $2.1 billion in the rainy day fund, and that's earning about $7.5 million a month. It's interesting, when you came in the legislature back in 2010, the rainy day fund had $2 million. Today, it's $2.1 billion. So that's our savings account in case there is a recession. So in our savings account, we got $2.1 billion. And in our checking account, we have $2.4 billion. And then, like you said, the new revenue numbers from the governor's office came out, and now those are even $300 million above projections. So we have the money. Why not utilize that to help our taxpayers and to help our schools? Mm-hmm. Just baffling.
To your point, yeah, there was a story that came out today, and it was analysis finding the surplus deal would have sent Wisconsin's budget into the red. That's the news story. That's kind of what Tony is referring to.
Well, I'll even go. I don't mean to.
Yeah, go ahead.
But this is something that the hypocrisy here is staggering, and so this is what I mean. Every 2 years, the governor, typically in February of the odd year, will introduce his budget. All right, so in February of 25, the governor introduced his state budget. In his state budget, as written, would have raised a lot of taxes, would have hired over 800 employees for the state. And you know what the deficit was for that budget?
No.
$4.4 billion. So on one hand, you have these people saying, oh, you're going to blow the budget. But yet, when you go back, if I go back in time in February of 25, I will guarantee you, I will find a bunch of Democrats that wrote about how great the governor's budget was, even though that budget, if enacted, would have had a $4.4 billion deficit. And now they're complaining about a budget deficit that we truly think we're going to be just fine with. They're looking for any excuse on why they voted no. And so that dog's not going to hunt.
What about you, Howard? Any comment?
Yeah. So, that deficit is, and we always have a deficit when we do the budget, because it does not, when they do those calculations, it does not include any revenue increases into the future. It includes the increases in our expenses, but not any revenue. Or when I say revenue, it's tax collection. So, and we've, the Legislative Fiscal Bureau, nonpartisan, they indicate that this $2.9 billion structural deficit, we would need to have tax increases of about 4%, okay, into the future to make that up. So, what has been the historical increase in our taxes? So for the last, and I just got a new memo from the Fiscal Bureau a day or two ago. So for the last 11 years, our annual average increase in our tax revenues has been 4.4%. Okay? So this idea that, we've got this big deficit, whatever, well, is ridiculous to Tony's point. And I don't know, it's just very, very frustrating. I'm I would not have voted. Tony and I are on Joint Finance Committee, so we had an opportunity to vote on this thing twice. Once in Finance last week, and which I supported. We would not have voted on this if I had any discomfort with the deficits, into the future. I mean, it's one of those things where you can pull something out in isolation and make it look terrible, and the reality is, from a historical standpoint, it's there's not that concern at all. So, but I just did want to highlight. Tony mentioned Richland schools, but I also got some numbers here for some of my local school districts, and in the special education pot of money. This is in the second year their increase in their spending. This is spendable money. This isn't property. The schools can spend this, and Boscobel $272,000, Fenimore $259,000, Iowa Grant $195,000, River Valley's $377,000, Riverdale $172,000. So I don't know how many staff is that. I mean, that's meaningful money, and I've heard from a number of district administrators since this thing went down last week, and they're frustrated too, because they were seeing this as an opportunity to help plug some of the finance holes with their schools, and I don't know. Again, it's just disappointing. So on tax collections, we just got the numbers, I think, in the last couple of days from the administration, from the Department of Revenue. So for the first 10 months of our fiscal year, okay, we end our year on June 30th, next month, and our tax collections are up 5.2%, okay? Again, you put that $2.9 billion, deficit. I mean, the numbers are solid at this point, as Tony said as well.
Representative Novak saying today or this week that we should go back into session. Is that going to happen, Tony?
I have no idea, but I agree wholeheartedly with Todd. I mean, I said it the other day. I was on a different program, and I said I hope the governor calls us back in for a special session. This needs to be done. It's one of those things that it's just mind-blowing and then once again they can come up with any excuse they want. To Howard's point, I've been on the Joint Finance Committee for three budgets. Howard, you've been on what, 6?
Something like that.
We would never, let me repeat this, we would never have voted for this if we were concerned at all about putting the state in any financial strain. It would not happen. And it's interesting. I know some other people are saying, well, 3 lame ducks, crafted this bill. The governor, obviously, he's not running again. The Speaker of the Assembly, he's not running again. And the Majority Leader of the Senate, he's not running again. The problem is all the people on the Joint Finance Committee that voted for it, all with the exception of one, we all want to come back. And so why would we put ourselves in some bad financial position going into the next budget? We would never, I repeat it, we would never have voted for this if we didn't think the state could afford it. Because, like I said, the proof is in the pudding. Like I told you, in 2010, the rainy day fund was $2 million. We have had some really good balanced budgets. We made some investments. We are living within our means. The state's doing very good financially. Let's try to get that money back to the people that need it.
It's tough, Howard, for especially, district administrators trying to make those school budgets for the next year to kind of know what's going on, right?
Right. Again, the timing, I thought the timing was perfect, because they would have gotten some immediate relief in the current, their current fiscal year, but then as they're doing their budgets now, they could, forecast that. It would be predictable, certain, which I know that a lot of our district administrators, they always want to know, what are the numbers going to be? So, again, the timing, I think the timing was perfect, for our school district administrators and our school district. So, I've heard from school board members, and it's just we're disappointed, but there's a lot of school districts that are very disappointed as well.
Sure. I do want to emphasize the timeline. I mentioned that earlier. Howard just mentioned it. I know some of my colleagues, they want to wait and to see, how everything shakes out after, the election in November. The problem with that is we could do relief right now. The longer we wait, we're literally talking 14 to 15 months from now. And the reason why I say that is obviously you got the election in November. Everybody gets sworn in January of 27. And then immediately, starting in January, what are we working on again? The state budget. So for the next 6 months, all the focus is going to be on what do we do for the state budget. And so the best case scenario, let's say typically, a budget gets signed by the 1st of July. So 1st of July of 27 is before we can truly do something to help taxpayers, but also help schools. So all we're doing is delaying the inevitable. People, to Howard's point, people need it now. Our school district need it now, but yet we're going to wait now for 15 months to figure something out. And like I said, I think it's a very poor excuse. And I hope people can hear my frustration, because this is one of the things that just, as Howard says, this is just pure politics, and it's very disappointing.
If the governor would call, emergency session or whatever, do you think it would pass again if it came up?
I don't know. It's. I would think that there's some senators that are out there visiting with their constituents, and I'm sure they're hearing it. So I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, I agree. Let's give it another shot. That would be good. So, another thing I wanted to touch on just quickly here is it's often overlooked, and that's the $300, $600, $300 per person, rebate. And we talked about this a few months ago about the surplus, the additional tax money coming in. A significant amount of that was what I believe is one-time money, capital gains, because the stock market was so high last year. Okay, so, and I'll tell you, we have been very cautious over the last several budgets about building in. We got a lot of federal money came into the state. We were incredibly cautious when we did the budgets about building in that one-time federal money into our long-term, in our ongoing expenses, because what do you do next year when you don't have that federal money coming in? And so with this one-time money that we got, again, was told about back in January, we kind of wanted to match that one-time money with one-time outlays. You don't want to base special education funding on one-time money. So that's why that was the whole concept of the rebates to people, and so from a structural standpoint, I think we were incredibly responsible in taking this one-time money and giving it back to people, not building it into ongoing kinds of programs that you're going to regret next year when the budget is being done.
Yeah, no doubt. Tony, anything else you want to add before we break?
I'm kind of speechless right now.
That's a first.
No, like I said, there was other couple other things that we did try at the very end. I mean, we put there was a disaster aid program that was something that we added toward the end, and which would have really helped. Obviously, a lot of people may not realize we had an EF3 go up through Union Center, a couple weeks ago. You had all the other damage in the Rock Springs, North Freedom area. That was something we put in this package to try to see if we could get some Democrats' votes. That didn't even persuade people, and that would immediately help those people that were damaged by the storms. There was a veteran property tax relief. Right now, if you are a veteran with 100% disabled, you get a good portion of your property tax back. We were lowering that down to those that may have 80% or 90% disabled, and that's a big priority of the state American Legion and the state VFW. That too was in here, and once again, those are the type of things that just very disappointing that those didn't get across the finish line.
We have more to talk about. We'll do that after the break. Tony Kurtz and Howard Marklein in the studio with us today. We'll be right back. Tony Kurtz and Howard Marklein, our guests in the morning show studios today. Howard, we haven't had a chance to chat with you, but you are going to be up for re-election, and you chose to run again.
Yes, I am. I've my background is an accountant, growing up on a dairy farm here in the area and that kind of thing. And so my background, I think, has been very helpful in representing Southwest Wisconsin in our rural communities. I get it. I understand it. And so excited about it, running again this fall. And
kind of the same goals you've had before?
Yeah, I mean, the issues are very similar. And I'm somebody that I knock on a lot of doors and listen to a lot of people, and I'm out at all kinds of different events and stuff, so I connect with people in our rural areas, and so I understand what they're doing and what their concerns are. So, and I think affordability is something that's on people's minds right now. So, the other thing that I think we do an outstanding job of in our office, and that is responding to constituents on their issues. Dealing with state government. Getting a permit and it could be any agency. It could be the DOT, DHS, DNR, and I've got an outstanding staff. Been there for a while. They know who to call in these agencies. So when you call up because you haven't gotten your permit, Lancaster Hospital, their addition, they've been struggling with getting DHS to give them approval, and so they reached out to me a week or two ago, and they got it this week. So they will be breaking ground in the next probably next week. So it's that kind of stuff that that isn't. You're not going to have that on your news in the mornings and stuff, but it's the kind of stuff that I think I feel good about doing in the past, and just helping people solve their. And that's not a Republican or Democrat thing. I just if somebody needs help with state government, I'm happy that we can provide that help.
You'll have to knock on some new doors this time, though.
Yeah, and I have been. I've been. I've been in. Prairie du Chien in Oregon and Mount Horeb and a lot of those new communities. So Arena is a new probably be there this afternoon.
All right, Tony. We talked a little bit about it, but the struggle continues for farmers. You've been hearing that, I'm sure, when you're out at some of your town hall meetings.
Oh no, we've been hearing that a lot. Obviously, with the prices, but also obviously the fuel price. I called yesterday to have my fuel barrel filled up. Normally it's a 550-gallon fuel barrel. Normally I have them fill it up, like I told them, hey, only put 300 gallons in it. So that's going to be a sticker shock. So, finally we're getting some, hopefully next week, it's going to be some nice warm weather. I know up in my area, most of the folks have their crops in, but now we just need some heat. But no, it's hard out there unless you're a cattle guy. Cattle guys are still doing really well. That's that because there's such a shortage in the feeder markets and stuff like that. But corn prices and soybean prices, I did see some optimism. I know China now is going to buy $17 billion worth of soybeans, so that's a good thing for our farmers. So.
And the unknown, though, is the fuel prices.
It is. I didn't expect this with Iran to go on as long as it has. I don't think anybody has, but it is. It's a strain. It affects. When I'm in Union Center and I go fill up, and 7 weeks ago it was $2.29, and today I think it was $4.39. So yeah, it hurts. And especially those individuals on fixed incomes and those that are trying to make ends meet. You're trying to have me go back to what we talked about earlier in the first half. That's why we want to try to give some money back to help people. But no, trust me, I wish it would get over just like everybody else, because it is a strain. It's gonna affect. It's gonna pinch different people.
And I think, Howard, a lot of businesses notice it, especially the non-essential things. People are probably cutting back on some of that funding, some of the spare time things, right?
Yeah, and one thing I am kind of keeping my eye on a little bit here is over the next month or so is our sales tax collections, because as people are putting more money into their gas tank, which is not subject to sales tax, and they only got a fixed income, that means they're not buying they're not going into the store and buying that stuff that is taxable. So I'm just keeping an eye on that to see if there's going to be some falling off at all in our sales tax collections, because people have to buy gas to get to work or school, and which may affect their purchases of other things which are taxable.
EMS week going on. I know you'd like to talk about that a little bit this morning.
Yeah. So and Tony and I have done quite a few bills and items in the budget for our EMS personnel. And I just want to, first of all, start out by just thanking all of those EMS volunteers. When we dial 911, we expect, somebody to show up. Well, and then who is that person? Well, it could be your neighbor, who's a EMS volunteer. So, and recently, the Joint Finance Committee, we did two different things in the budget. We released some of the money earlier for our tech colleges, and $3.5 million. And that was to provide our tech colleges with more capacity to train more people. And I know Southwest Tech just announced, I think this week, that they added another course, summer course, and I think they had like 47 people sign up almost immediately. So that's 47 more people that are going to be able to step in and volunteer in our communities, which we certainly need. The other thing that we did was, and we approved this last week, was $3.5 million to provide reimbursement for the training for our EMS volunteers, because what happens too often, I think, sometimes is I make the decision that I'm prepared to volunteer, but then I got to go through the classes, which runs upwards of $1,000 or better to take the classes to become a EMR or EMT. And, it's a hit. We talk about, costs being up and stuff. So the bill the provision we got in the budget and the money we just released last week would provide reimbursement to cover the costs of training. And that starts this fall. And so, again, that's, we're trying to do is eliminate all of the barriers, all the obstacles for people to become EMRs and EMTs. Staffing still is the biggest issue that they face. It's a head count kind of thing. And I was at Bloomington for the West Grant Lions Club, and put on a steak feed the other night, and they had me come down and help with grilling the steaks and stuff, and they wanted to acknowledge the West Grant EMS volunteers, and you look around that room, and they're not 28-year-old people, so we need to keep getting younger and younger people involved, and when they have to lift people and that kind of thing. Again, we have volunteers that are older, but there comes a point too where they can physically do the work that is required of them.
And in fact, as far as EMS, that's been in the county topic here recently.
Richland County
trying to fund it.
Huge issue here in the county, and one of the other bills that Howard and I did that actually got signed into law a couple weeks ago was basically it would be a levy limit extension to go outside of the county lines. Right now you can have a countywide EMS service where it's kind of outside the levy limits. The bill that we passed would allow you to go outside the county lines, and as long as you still had 8 municipalities. And so it would, for instance, you have Casanova. Casanova's right on the Sauk County, Richland County line. You got Viola, which, by the way, Viola on Sunday has their EMS
pancake
breakfast. Yeah. I'm going to plan on going over there on Sunday morning. And then, that's on right on the border. Lone Rock, same way, right on the border there. So it just gives another option. To Howard's point, it's another tool in the toolbox to help with EMS. You got to think about a couple years ago now. We got rid of there was a federal test that every EMR had to take, and unfortunately a lot of people were failing that. It had nothing to do with if you could do your job or not. And so thankfully we got rid of that. And I think to Howard's point, it's just trying to streamline and do whatever we can to get that next generation of providers, because to Howard's point, unfortunately, we get old, and we do need that next generation, and that's what we're trying to do. Anything we can to help them with the training.
Road work continuing. Any new updates there?
Oh, well, I know Howard's got a good update on Highway 60, but no, I mean, it's that time of year. I know people get very frustrated. I will say this. I've been to a lot of town association meetings, Wisconsin Towns Association. In the state budget, in the last two, we've had the Agriculture Road Improvement Program. That's to help with roads that have heavy ag product. So this is something that counties and townships are typically apply for. The next application period is due at the end of June. It's a 90-10 match. So in other words, you get 90% of the money will come from the state, 10% from the locals. So that's something I hope people will apply for. It's a great program. The other part of that is a bridge program. It's amazing. It was a $30 million that we had in the budget for that. Right now, that is woefully overprescribed. I think it's 140 million of applicants for that 30. So obviously, there's a need for that. And basically, there was prior to us doing this, there was no program to help with those bridges under 20 feet. And so now this was a program to help those communities that have those bridges under 20 feet, which you look in Richland County, there's a lot of bridges that fall in that category. And it's something that, a lot of these bridges, I mean, let's be honest, they're 70, 80, 90 years old in some cases. And so that is a program as we start, once again, we talked about the budget. We start budget negotiations next January again. That's a program we need to look at, because obviously $30 million was not enough.
Yeah, you have an update on Highway 60, Howard?
Yeah, so before we talk about that, one thing I wanted to comment on, follow up to Tony's comments on the Ag Road Improvement Program, and the other local program is the LRIP, the Local Road Improvement Program. And, I just encourage our townships, municipalities, et cetera, to apply for these programs. The reason I bring this up is I was in Crawford County a month or so ago for a towns unit meeting, and there wasn't a township in Crawford County that applied for the LRIP, Local Road Improvement Program grants. They were guaranteed. If any township, any project had submitted it, they would have been guaranteed to receive it. And as I tell people, one thing I guarantee you, if you don't apply, you'll never get it. So again, just, I encourage people. Sometimes I think I've heard from people like our project isn't that is too big or too small or too whatever. If you don't apply, you're never going to get the money. You have no chance. So anyway, I just I heard that recently in Crawford County. But so yeah, I did. And roads are one of those things. I think it's a bipartisan concern, what's going on and stuff. And so a couple of people asked me recently about Highway 60 from Highway 14 to Muscadet, and it looks like that is going to be, construction will begin next year. So they're working on the design right now, getting that done. Real estate acquisition apparently is ongoing right now, and and I know you're familiar with that, Phil. It's there's going to be some challenges there. You got a rock wall and a river, and
yeah.
I'm not an engineer. I don't know how they're going to do that blast. And I think there's I know one homeowner sold their home. So, but it sounds like construction will begin next year in 2027. And from what I'm hearing here, the earliest construction could start is next year, June of 2027. But this might go into 2028 and maybe beyond. So, again, I guess encourage people to. I mean, it needs it. It's one of those roads that it certainly needs the attention, like Highway 14 out here in front of your studio. But it's going to be quite a detour for a lot of people traveling east and west.
Yeah, well, for me, that's for sure. Yeah. I go to most of my games that direction.
Yes.
So.
It's something that I know it's incredible inconvenience for folks. It's just I hope everybody understands it needs to be done. I mean, we were behind. We've been trying to play catch up over the last several budgets to fix our roads, and we got a lot more work to do. But obviously it's an inconvenience. But once it gets done, it'll be really nice.
Interesting. Well, it could be a quiet summer, but again, if you get called back in, Tony, you'd welcome that chance.
Oh, I'd go today in a heartbeat. I really would. And there's a lot of different things going on. Like I said, I give a shout out to all our wonderful EMS providers. Like I said, I'm looking forward to Viola. And then obviously Monday is a very sacred day, at least for me and many of our area veterans, as we honor Memorial Day.
Indeed. Will you be out at any of the services?
I mean, unfortunately, I'll miss the one. I will give the Richland community. You have a tremendous one on Memorial Day here at the cemetery. I've been there many times. This Monday, I actually get to speak at the Reedsburg ceremony, so I'm very honored to do that.
Good. Yeah, that's a great honor to do that then. So, Howard, what about you? Are you out this weekend?
Yeah. So I'm trying to think. We've got some family stuff going on. And Monday, in Lafayette County, their Memorial Day services are down there. And in Lafayette County, there were 2 servicemen killed that I have attended their services. Since I've been in office. So, and I know those families. And it's still raw. For a lot of those families that have lost young men in Afghanistan. So anyway, yeah, and we got it. The Senate Sergeant at Arms, who's a Marine, a retired Marine, and he sent out an email the other day to the senators and said basically, don't say Happy Memorial Day. There's nothing happy about it. We should be honoring, their legacy and them making the ultimate sacrifice. And he listed the members of his unit that were lost in service. And so, I know it's, a day off for people and all that stuff, but, it should be a solemn day to remember those people that have given their lives for our freedoms.
Yeah, well said. That's the reason why people can go out and do what they want to do this weekend, right?
Yes.
So, interesting. Well, we appreciate both coming in here and making time for us today. And
no, anytime, Phil.
Enjoy your time on the tractor later today, Tony.
Yeah, hopefully a lot of tractor time today and tomorrow.
That's good. That gives you time to think, right? Collect your thoughts.
I solve a lot of problems sitting on the tractor.
Representative Tony Kurtz and State Senator Howard Marklein, our guests on this edition of The Morning Show.